Another section. Okay.
This is the life of Ford. Our agenda is the birth, growth, decline, and opportunities. Birth, the founding of an organization, a dangerous life cycle stage associated with the great risk of failure. Ford Motor Company was incorporated June of 1903, and by July of 1903, Ford sold its first Model A. It is important to note that between 1904 and 1908, 241 firms began producing cars for the American consumer. However, in 1908, Ford began producing the Model T with the goal of being simple and affordable. Ford was trying to provide a vehicle that was not for luxury in the city, but a vehicle for the average American. In 1913, Ford Motor Company leaves the Craftswork small batch technology and introduces progressive manufacturing or mass production. By 1914, Ford has over 15,000 workers and with 255 supervisors, not to include top management. Jones states that the span of control for a supervisor was 58 employees. This was possible because the work was not directed by supervisors, but by the pace of the production line. The production line was so efficient, but by the early 1924 Motor Company was producing 2 million cars a year. The principles of birth for mass production was the introduction of the conveyor belt, which allowed work to come to the workers. The second principle was the standardization of the work that was being done. There was an order and a sequence for tasks to be accomplished that was coordinated with the conveyor belt speed. The last principle was tasks would be broken down into the simplest form. Joan gives the examples of one worker would assemble a tail light and a reflective panel, while the other would screw a lens on the reflective panel. Henry Ford realized that the best way to capture a mass market was by mass production. Therefore, he utilized a K-generalist strategy by producing a low-price standardized car. Because like we stated, up until this point in time, cars were considered luxury items, and Ford wanted to provide a product for the masses.
Now we will discuss the growth of Ford. This is the life cycle stage in which organizations develop value creation skills and competencies that allow them to acquire additional resources. According to Jones, an organization structure is the formal system of tasks and authority relationships that control how people coordinate actions and resources to achieve organizational goals. In order to understand Ford's current structure, we must discuss its domain and environment. Ford's domain includes their products, which are cars, trucks, crossovers, SUVs, vans, electric vehicles, and vehicle parts and accessories. Services that Ford offers are maintenance and repair, financing, and insurance services related to their financing programs. Ford's specific environment includes its customers, such as rental car companies, leasing companies, and retail customers, their large network of distribution centers and warehouses, United Auto Workers Union, their main competitors, which are General Motors, Honda, Nissan, Toyota, and Volkswagen, their more than 1,200 Tier 1 suppliers, and governmental groups and standards such as emissions control standards and the EPA. Forces in Ford's general environment include societal expectations for product safety and fuel efficiency, overseas auto companies, rules and regulations, market shares, trade policies, emissions control standards, and import taxes. Also, the rise of electric vehicles and new production techniques, rising gas prices, foreign currency fluctuations, and the approaching peak oil. Because of Ford's complex domain and environment, a multidivisional structure has emerged. According to Jones, multidivisional structures allow for growth and expansion toward an organization's goals because corporate headquarters staff are able to focus on the organization's long-term goals. Ford overcomes one of the disadvantages of multidivisional structures, which is decreased coordination and increased rivalry between divisions, by implementing their One Ford strategy. Focus and coordination between divisions increases innovation and drives Ford toward their long-term goals. Functions that support Ford's operations are self-contained in separate divisions so that they are specialized and focused solely on value creation. Ford's CEO, Jim Hackett, and Executive Officer William Ford Jr. oversee the vice presidents and managers of each division, making for a very flat and wide hierarchy. According to Jones, an organization should keep their hierarchy as flat as possible to keep value creation high. One of Ford's competencies is their strong financial performance. Ford's gross profit margin was 12.8% in 2014, right behind the industry median of 16.5%. Ford also has a high return on equity compared to its competitors, as shown in the chart below. Ford's strong financial performance has allowed them to invest in R&D. Ford has their own team of client scientists that inform Ford of what will be required of their vehicles in the future, facilitating innovation and differentiation. Ford has innovation strongly embedded in their culture. According to our textbook, culture that supports the structure of a company is the most difficult core competency to imitate. Ford utilized backward vertical integration to lower the cost of R&D while also facilitating differentiation. This is exemplified by the internal team of climate scientists who keep Ford up to date on the needs of the environment. This enables Ford to charge a lower cost for their hybrid vehicles and electric vehicles than if they outsourced to gather their climate research. Ford also has strong brand recognition.
Henry Ford was an innovator and wanted an easier way to make the cars he was producing. The process of making cars used to be very meticulous and took several specialized mechanics and workers just to be able to make one car. According to Jones, in 1913, Henry Ford came up with progressive manufacture, or what we today know as mass production. This method of progressive manufacture sped up the car building process exponentially. Not only was Ford one of the original organizations to use an assembly line to build a product, they also used interchangeable parts. Suppliers had to follow strict specifications for each product so that parts would not have to be remade, but also so that production would not slow down or stop just because of an ill-fitting part. Ford was so obsessed with the quality of these supplies that they started mining their own iron ore in Upper Michigan so that there was much less risk of having to stop production. Since we know that by the 1920s, Ford was making over 2 million cars a year, he was very demanding of his 15,000 workers. They were not allowed to drink alcohol, even outside of work, and could be fired instantly by a supervisor if any rules were disobeyed. So needless to say, these changing technologies were pushing workers to their limits. Large batch production increases the use of machines and equipment so that hopefully efficiency can be increased. This method is used usually with standardized products, including cars that Ford makes. Activities of workers are highly controlled and standardized as well. This method allows for lower prices on products because organizations are able to save money on production. According to Jones, production costs plummeted, and Ford was able to lower the cost of a Model T and create a mass market for his product. When it comes to routine technology, Ford is pretty much the epitome of routine. Tasks are low in variability and high in analyzability. Production is fairly predictable and rarely deviates from the prescribed process. The tasks are repetitive, and workers are constantly doing the same task over and over again. Task analyzability is high for Ford because since a car is built step by step, there is little chance for a solution to be found without disrupting the whole production line. Ford also follows the task interdependence method of being long-linked. Most mass production is based on this method and basically says that the actions of one worker or department will directly affect the actions of the one following them. If any mistake is made at the beginning of the process, then it will end up being a much bigger problem later on if it is not managed properly. One way that companies combat potential problems is with slack resources. Slack resources are supplies that are basically an inventory of extra items to have when unexpected situations arise.
Next, we'll talk about the decline of Ford. This is the life cycle stage that an organization enters when it fails to anticipate, recognize, avoid, neutralize, or adapt to external or internal pressures that threaten its long-term survival. The Whittle and Johnson model for organizational decline can be applied to Ford during many of their hardships. The most trying moments for Ford have been the Great Depression in 1929 and the 2008 recession. Fortunately, Ford has never fully gotten to the crisis and dissolution stages. Ford has always been able to get through difficult times. Ford fell victim to the Great Depression in 1929. They ended up losing $68 million per year. Ford was a large assistance to the economy of Detroit. They ended up loaning about $12 million to banks around the year 1933. This instance would be an example of the blinded stage. Ford did not realize that lending money might hurt them in the long run. Ford was able to survive with help from its Model A car. In 2008, the United States experienced the greatest economic crisis since the Great Depression. Ford was not immune to this. According to the New York Times, Ford reported a loss of $14.6 billion during that time period, though they were not alone. Other car companies experienced similar losses. Ford was able to somewhat pull themselves out of the hole. Ford has had many different leadership changes during its time. Henry Ford I died in April 1947. This was a shock to the company because he was the original founder. After his death, however, Ford was able to create many new models. Around 1977, the CEO at the time, Henry Ford II, was allegedly dealing with financial misconduct and bribery. The Clean Air Act, amended in 1977, caused Ford to have to follow many new regulations. In 2001, Ford was forced to recall 300,000 vehicles due to faulty Firestone tires on the Ford Explorer. This resulted in a loss of $5.45 billion. Many deaths had been linked to this error. Most recently, in 2017, Jim Hackett was appointed as the new CEO. Hackett is replacing retiring Mark Fields. With this leadership change comes a new executive structure. Jim Farley is the Executive Vice President for Global Markets. John Heinrichs is the Executive Vice President of Global Operations, and Marcy Keyborn is the Executive Vice President of Mobility.
Ford has a number of promising opportunities for growth in their future. One of those opportunities is the on-the-go H2O. Engineers at Ford have found a way to save the condensation from their vehicles' air conditioning systems, filter this water, and turn it into drinkable water. This could be a lifesaver, especially in high drought areas of the world. Autonomous cars. Ford is partnering with different technology companies trying to ensure that Ford can have an autonomous self-driving car by 2021. The vehicle will operate without a gas pedal, brake pedal, or steering wheel. If Ford can mass produce this self-driving vehicle, then they will have achieved the highest level of automation by any car manufacturer. Jim Hackett, as the new CEO, can potentially be a fresh start for Ford. He will bring new ideas to the table and have a different perspective from past years. Hackett will have a plan to implement his changes. According to Bruce Weitz, a former CEO of King's Supermarkets, he will also, a new CEO will look out for employees within the company that will be supporting of his changes, and he will also realize that not all of his changes can happen all at once. Ford has announced in a media presentation in the past few weeks that, quote, Hackett will focus on 3 priorities: sharpening operational execution, modernizing Ford's present business, and transforming the company to meet tomorrow's challenges. Thank you, and have a good day.